Okay, and I'll share that we are live, and then we can kick it off. Okay. 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 So that's done. Okay. So we are live, and I'll give it like a minute, and then I'll do a quick intro, and then.
Great.
And let me make sure I have. I always give it a minute or two because there's always like a slow increase. I've only been to Chicago once or twice. Beautiful. I mean, freezing, but beautiful.
It is beautiful. It's not freezing at the moment. It's
Nice.
still like 80 degrees here at the moment, but I think it's going to like drop pretty significantly.
People think LA is hot. I'm on the west side by the coast, and it's like a solid 65, 70 like all year round. It doesn't get 80, 90 degrees.
I mean, once you've spent those summers in Philly,
you're like,
then anything else is a bit of a nice respite from that.
Exactly. Okay, so I'm going to give it 35. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to kick us off.
Okay.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Accelerator Insider, where we explore the minds behind accelerators, incubators, and venture studios. We interview innovation leaders to learn how they build businesses for today and the future. And I'm really excited to have Luke Butler joining us. He is the executive director in startup engagement and the head of the Lift Labs Accelerator with NBC Comcast Universal. I'm probably saying that backwards. It might be Comcast NBC Universal.
Comcast NBC Universal, yeah.
Yes. And so thank you so much for joining us today, Luke. I really appreciate it.
Of course, it's so exciting to do this. I've been following what you've been doing, and also given that we used to work together in a completely different field, it's nice to reconnect around this.
Yes, exactly. And it's actually kind of funny because I feel like so many folks have moved into the innovation ecosystem coming from different market segments and areas and industries, because it's really where, the idea of like future planning exists, right? If you work in government or you work in tech or you work in finance, like we're all starting to really think about like, what's the future look like? And everyone who wants to play in that space, I think, kind of slowly moves there. And you've been doing this for a while, actually. You've been with Comcast for probably about a decade now, right? Doing this
5 or 6 years.
5 or 6 years.
Since I started, yeah.
Yes, and that was when you first started. As we're going to jump into the interview actually here, and everyone who watches can you can read Luke's bio on LinkedIn. So I'm not going to go deep into his bio because there's a lot of information there. But Comcast has been through a journey also, and obviously being also in Philadelphia where we first met, transitioning over there. Really, what I would say is kind of, even 5, 6 years ago, it's still kind of early from a corporate innovation standpoint in terms of folks trying to build this into how they think about business. And so maybe just talk me through a little before we get into like the program right now, kind of the journey that you've been with Comcast, with the kind of innovation and accelerator kind of ecosystem that you've been with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thank you for having me. It's to reconnect with you. I think you're right. I think Comcast has evolved over the years from what you may have thought of as a kind of a traditional cable and internet provider into really a media technology company. And I think, I mean, you and I served together in government in Philadelphia, and were there when Comcast announced that they were going to build the Comcast Technology Center. And that, I think, was the real statement of this is what the company is now. This is these are this is the sort of message that we want to send to the best technologists in the world, that if you're leading your leaders in your field and you want to build really exciting technology at scale, then Comcast is a company that you should consider coming to work for. And as people whose jobs it was to run Philadelphia and attract people to Philadelphia, that was a really exciting statement because it meant that we could bring lots of people that may not have thought of Comcast as a place to work to come and be here. So the fact that we invested in this building, the Comcast Technology Center, which holds all of our innovation teams, the fact that we dedicated a floor of that building to our team, to Lift Labs, and to that kind of interaction between the technologists that work for Comcast and interesting and exciting early stage founders that are building technologies that are relevant to us, I think is a real statement of the evolution that that has occurred and the sort of company that we are and we want people to think of us as right now.
So a couple of years ago, I worked with National Grid, helping them basically kind of commercialize a lot of their energy technology. But Comcast is a little bit different in the sense that it really kind of was a partner at that time with the city of Philadelphia and thinking about innovation as not just kind of important for Comcast, but really important for the city, to your point, more broadly. And I want to just talk a little bit about like that kind of public-private partnership piece of innovation and like building cities that have technology or innovation at their core. People kind of are fighting for kind of to be the new innovation center. What was that like? And kind of were you part of that experience of trying to kind of bring those worlds together?
Yeah, and interestingly, kind of on both sides of the table. So in the beginning, my relationship with Comcast and our administration's relationship was one of kind of partnering with them to support the growth of what you call the kind of innovation ecosystem in Philadelphia. And as one of the biggest employers, as a one of the biggest well-known brands in the city, they played a critical role in that. And so the people who ultimately created our team and brought on people like my former boss Danielle Kahn, who was brought on to kind of lead this effort in the beginning. They were really working with us to think about how do we attract new businesses into the city? How do we use Comcast as this kind of center of gravity that can pull interesting technologies into the city? When we were meeting with companies that we were where we were making the case for why should you come to Philadelphia? Why should you locate your headquarters here? Is there talent here that can support you? We'd often bring people from Comcast to those discussions and have them help us make the case around, why this is a great place, or why Philadelphia is a great place to build a business. And so they were kind of always at the table. And then as they as I said, as they had plans to build the Comcast Technology Center and think more about the role that Comcast plays in the Philadelphia technology community, that's when they asked people to come in and help build out that team and build out the program. And the way that my boss, Sam Schwartz, who is the Chief Business Development Officer for Comcast, the way that he describes it is he wanted the walls of that new building to be permeable. The people that were working inside of the tower would be out in the community, and that the community, the technology community that surrounded Comcast, would feel that this is a place that they can come into. All the way down to as you come into the Comcast Technology Center, and there's this beautiful lobby. The only part of the building that you can see into, like there's a big window at the top of the lobby, and that's the Lift Labs floor. And that was a deliberate statement of, we want this to be more transparent. We want to build these relationships and have technology and early stage companies feel like this is a place that I can come and this is a company that I can work with.
And I actually remember that building, and I remember that big screen. So actually, and it is beautiful. Actually, and if anyone goes to Philadelphia, is in Philadelphia, it's definitely worth. I mean, still beautiful checking out as well. But I mean, we can talk about. I want to kind of go into the labs, but I think this is a really interesting conversation because I do talk to a lot of folks in government who are really thinking about innovation and trying to understand how to participate in a thoughtful way with their corporate partners. And I think Comcast is just a really great example of what they did in Philadelphia, that other cities are trying to either, mimic or understand, especially because the rate of innovation is just increasing rapidly, and folks are just trying to like keep pace with like how to be relevant today and in the future. And that's a really a public and private, conversation. that folks are starting to have. So yeah, that's awesome. So I want to talk about Lift Labs a little bit. So one of the big things it says on the website when I first opened it up was entrepreneurship is in our DNA. And so I thought, well, yeah, it's a company, so that kind of makes sense. But what does that mean? And that's a pretty, it's a bold statement. And so how is that showing up in Lift Labs?
Yeah. Well, it kind of goes back to some of the things that we touched on as to why our team was created and the prominence that we're given. But ultimately, Comcast is a massive global corporation, but still relatively unique in that we're led by the family that founded the company. Our CEO, Brian Roberts, is the son of Ralph Roberts, who founded the company around 60 years ago in a small place called Tupelo, Mississippi. And that has since grown to this global business, and the spirit of Ralph Roberts, certainly for people that have been at Comcast for some time, kind of really lives on. I think he was a very creative entrepreneur. He was a risk taker. He encouraged all of the teams and people that worked with him to push the envelope and really take risks and push boundaries. And I think our current leader, Brian, has really carried on that message. And the fact that our team exists and has given such support is testament to that. And, in a big corporation, one of the things that you have to kind of guard against is you can quickly become quite safe. And it's easier not to take risks. This will sound familiar to somebody that worked in government as well. There's often very little payoff for trying something new. And that's part of the inertia that you battle with a bureaucracy. And so Comcast, I think, in order to attract some of the people that I was talking about, you have to really walk the walk when it comes to being a technology company, being open to trying new things, being open to failure and learning. And so that spirit, I think, kind of lives on in the business, in the technology teams, and a little bit through us as well.
So you've been with Compass for a couple years. How has that transition been for the company as Lift Labs kind of working internally with the teams, with the staff? I know that when I was working with National Grid, it was a shift in behavior. They were super open to it, but it was really a challenge from just a kind of a habit formation, just like change how they move. How has that been, and how have you experienced that in Comcast? Was it super easy from the get-go? Has it been a little bit more of an effort to get people kind of invested at the ground level? Like, what's that experience been working with the enterprise?
Well, I think that in many senses, the raw ingredients were already there. I think the desire to work with founders, to try new things, to test new technologies, it lives in the business and lives in the teams that build the products in the company. I think what our team has helped to do is to harness that, to structure it, to give startups. We used to describe ourselves as the front door for startups that want to work with Comcast. And so our job is to really help synthesize what are the things that we're looking for, who are the best startups in the world that are doing this, and how do we structure a way that we can get to know them, test what they're building, connect them with the right teams in the business. And I think there are teams that were perhaps more predisposed to that type of thing in the beginning, but I think as we've grown over time and our team has become better known, and we've been able to share some of the startups that we work with a broader range of teams, we're now constantly getting people reaching out to us saying, oh, how do I get plugged into that? How do I get my teams to work with the startups that you guys identify? I saw this company in your portfolio. Can you connect me so that we can do a pilot with them? So I think the spirit has and that way of working has really spread across the business, and we're just a small part in helping to shape and harness that.
You had talked about, I mean, and that makes, I think, the long-term commitment, I think, has really been the benefit, because a lot of programs they test it, they do like these pilot things and they kind of iterate. But I think you guys have been kind of really consistent with the mission and the vision, and the iteration has been really intentional as it's become more aligned with the organization. I think we see that. And so particularly even right now, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the things that you guys offer, but currently, with Comcast and NBC Universal, and I think the partner currently is Sky TV or Sky Media. Before, I think you guys were working also with Techstars, but do you want to talk me through a little bit about like how you think about relationships and partnerships when it comes to the innovation work that Comcast is doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and just to clarify one thing, Sky is kind of part of our business. They're essentially the European arm of Comcast and NBC Universal in lots of ways. So they're kind of under our corporation. But you're right, we worked with Techstars for a number of years. I think that as our team has evolved, I think when we were standing up the program and looking for the right partners, we were thinking about one, who is the best in the world at structuring these sorts of early stage startup programs. We looked at lots of them. We landed on Techstars and had a great relationship with them over the course of a number of years. And I think their brand and credibility with startup founders really helped reflect well on Comcast. And they built great programs for us. We were, they run lots of corporate programs all around the world. I think we were probably one of, if not the most highly in something where we kind of paid them and said, hey, can you go off and run this accelerator? We brought them in to help really build a program that was custom to us, and our team was right there alongside them. And so we ran that for a number of years. And I think over time, just kind of refined what our objectives were, where we felt that we should really be focusing. And in the recent year, as our relationship with Techstars kind of came to an end, we decided, well, actually, we can do a lot of this ourselves. And the bits that we think we're good at and are really important to us almost necessarily need to be done by an internal team. So the things that we should focus on are, what is Comcast interested in when it comes to these different categories? How can we help exciting startups connect into those teams to explore whether or not we should be working together? There are, Comcast shouldn't really be telling people how to go and build a business or how to raise money. You have programs like Techstars that do that, and many others that do that well. We should focus on what we think that we can uniquely add to that. But Techstars and a whole range of other partners are still really close to us. I think it becomes this this kind of mutually reinforcing relationship where we're looking for interesting startups that can come and join our programs. Venture capitalists and other programs are looking for opportunities for the startups in their portfolios, and so we can kind of all help each other. But you got to kind of build those personal relationships and trust each other and all the rest of it in order to do that well.
I mean, that makes tons of sense. I mean, I think a lot of the work that Techstars has done over the last decade really has been capacity building for the ecosystem fundamentally, right? And I think we kind of forget that the idea is not for them to kind of, for external programs to really run the thing forever. It's really about that beneficial relationship of what do we uniquely both bring to the table, and then how do we like leverage each other to kind of get to that goal. And I think, again, what Comcast has done has been really insightful, because this also is unique that for what you're doing right now currently, because you're talking to mostly like seed stage companies for them in many cases. I mean, they're a little bit further along, they have some traction, and so many accelerators are focused on like kind of 0 to 1 ideation, kind of pre-seed. We're seeing this whole new corporate layer of accelerators that are focused on kind of healthier companies that are moving into a growth stage, and they're necessary. And when doing that, it's like, I don't need to focus on fundraising and MVP. That's like the purpose of us. We're really here to talk about how you actually can grow the business and be material for the companies that you want to sell to, really. And Compass has done a great job of that.
And I think what we learned over time was when working with the pre-seed companies, the ones that were much earlier, we could provide a lot of value to them with subject matter experts that were leaders in these fields that can help advise the companies, can help test a little bit. But in most cases, those companies are not ready to really plug in and work with a business as complex as ours. And so it was great in terms of some of the things we talked about earlier, in terms of like that spirit of entrepreneurship and people at our business wanting to give back and help founders. But where we really felt we could address a need on the Comcast side was, as we understand what are the areas of technology that we're looking to explore and invest in, and on the startup side, how do they actually see Comcast as a potential customer of theirs? You kind of have to come a little bit later. And in our recent programs, we've had still some quite early companies, but companies that have raised more than $100 million. And so the program is really tightly focused on how do we accelerate your relationship with Comcast. And that necessarily, in most cases, requires that you work with companies that are a little bit more enterprise ready.
You had talked about this idea of, I want to go back to enterprise ready in a second, but there's one thing in your list of kind of folk values, it's like access, mentorship, amplification. And I wanted to hone in on the amplification. Do you is that specific and unique because of the fact that Comcast NBC Universal is a media conglomerate in a sense? Or do you think it's something that all accelerators should have a component of as well?
I think at the core, so yes, the answer is, as a media company, I think we have perhaps a unique set of distribution channels and experts that can help in shaping and sharing company stories. And so that's really always been at the core of what we do. But the broader point is storytelling and articulating what you're doing in the most compelling, memorable way that's kind of really table stakes for all of these programs. Whether you're talking to investors or you're talking to potential customers, you have to really think about how you present what you do and land that memorable story that's going to stick in someone's mind who isn't maybe paying as much attention to you all the time as you would like. You've got to do something memorable that sticks with a person. And so that really, we focus a lot on that story creation, on sharing it through our own channels, on connecting the founders to the storytellers in our own organization that share these stories nationally and globally. But the core essence of it, I think, is really a big part of what any kind of either accelerator or kind of corporate startup program should be trying to do.
This is an area that I think is a shift, because if you looked at accelerators 10 years ago, or even the ecosystem 10 years ago, you'd hear a lot of like technology, don't care about marketing. You're doing B2B SaaS. It doesn't really matter. Even on the UX side, it was like, it can be a little clunky. Like people internally don't care. And now we're getting more of a consumer experience of all products, whether it's in the B2B or B2C, and the need to be top of mind and have awareness and have presence, and just having airtime is becoming like very critical to the success of a company. And so are you seeing that, is that showing up true even at the enterprise level, that those companies having those press moments, having that kind of external validation on social, are those things becoming more and more relevant in the conversation, or are they still secondary?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the biggest challenge that we face is for the technology and the product teams that we want our startups to work with. It's not like they've held part of their bandwidth and their roadmap to like, oh, maybe a startup is going to come in and they can plug into this gap that I have. They're pretty fully booked. Like they have a roadmap. They kind of know what they're doing. They're so busy, they don't typically have time to take on new things. And so the trick is you've got to have this compelling story, this compelling company that really jolts them and says, actually, we need to make time for this because this can help accelerate everything else that we're doing, or it could have a really meaningful impact on the business. And I think any kind of external validation, anything where you can say, well, they're already working with, I mean, FOMO is a real thing. And like, if we can point to, a rival or a competitor or something like that, be like, well, they're working with this company, that can help kind of move things along a bit a bit more quickly. And so you can share press, you can share previous customers. Big time investors are always something that captures people's imagination. At the core of it, the thing has to be real. You got to, and often, our team, if we really believe in something, whether or not they're working with other big companies, we'll find a way to get them in front of the right people and to get their attention focused on them. But I think you're right. Like with everything else that's going on in a big company, with an economic environment that is the one that we have today, anything that gets you a little bit ahead or can make you stick out in somebody's mind, I think is going to be really important to getting the attention of a big company.
The human behavior of like, hey man, I want to win, and we need to have some competition here. And so actually, this is a very kind of, and I know I'm off scripting here, so but this is a very specific kind of question about value proposition. So when you think about startups, oftentimes the story is like, this is how we can make you more money. Fundamentally, if we're selling to B2B, we're selling B2B to C in a sense, and usually we're helping you to the end customer create more value, so you generate more revenue. I think we're seeing a lot more folks saying, oh, this is actually an efficiency play. This is like a cost saving measure. How is that becoming a more compelling value proposition now? Before it was like, okay, cool, but since I can't really see the numbers now, I don't feel compelled to actually execute against that. Are we seeing a different market where like efficiency and cost savings is just as valuable as revenue generation, or not yet?
I absolutely think so. And I think that's in most cases, as we're looking at companies or as we're advising how to position something, it's through that lens initially, I think, that is the most compelling. I think there's a couple of reasons for that. One is, as I mentioned, the kind of economic environment where companies are being really thoughtful and strategic about investments that they're making, but they're also having to keep an eye on the costs and make reductions there, and always look for efficiencies that can help their teams. And so, for example, we're looking at a lot of AI at the moment, and so a lot of the companies that we're looking at are the role that they play is to make our teams better, to allow to take care of some of the maybe the boring manual work that a software developer has to do to address legacy issues in code or data, which frees them up to do more high value and creative work. And so I think that efficiency, leading with the efficiency is really compelling. The other thing, frankly, and I think all big corporations probably have a bit of this, is when you think about kind of feature creation and some of the products that go to market, there's a huge amount of pride that our product teams take in building those things. They understand the customer, they understand our business. And so, there's a bit of a sense of like, we own that, like that's we can do that. And so a company coming along that has a new product that they want to kind of plug in, that can be a harder sell than we've got something that's going to make your teams better as they go about building those more consumer-facing products.
I think that's like super insightful, and because I think a lot of young entrepreneurs are thinking like, we can replace this with this, like we're going to come in there and change everything, and it's going to be, this is what everyone wants, this is what, and it's actually like, well, no, there is actually a whole lifetime and journey of relationship management that's been happening in this company. They know their customers really, really well, and that's actually the part that they really enjoy. Right? They don't want to take that out of the work. They want more of that time in the work, right? And so looking for companies that can augment that or that can support those companies is really kind of the opportunity space, right? I think
broadly, yes. There's always room for new creative experiences. I'll give you an example where we've been working with a company called Neon Wild, which is an animation technology that helps place children and young people in the stories that are told, that creates avatars that represent the diversity of backgrounds and lived experiences that young people have today, and customize the stories around them. And so that for us, we have a whole range of really interesting IP stories that we've created over the years that allows us to tell the stories in a new way, to engage with young people in a new way and help them feel part of these updated versions of these stories. So that's something that's very consumer facing, and our teams have really embraced that as a way to think about new ways to share content and to tell stories. So I don't want to make any blanket statements because there is still room for that kind of thing. But I think at the outset, the kind of the cost saving efficiency thing at the moment is the more compelling case to make.
Well, I think what we're also finding is that, and I want to talk a little bit about kind of the themes and such, but we're also finding that because the ecosystem has grown and become more mature, the founders are becoming more mature in their understanding of their placement inside the business ecosystem. And so they're able to kind of map the market a little bit better and kind of know what the propositions are at different moments, right? And so I think we're seeing this constriction happening. So everyone's looking at efficiency. And I was talking to a company the other day that's doing something for kind of space and aerospace, and talking about the revenue models around cost efficiency and savings, which I actually learned a long time ago at the School of Philadelphia doing brownfields, and how to save cost. And so, but like that technique was like, oh, that's relevant now. Whereas before, trying to have them just buy outright a subscription or an annual whatever was less attractive to their customers. And so I think you're probably seeing something very similar, like the maturity of these companies and how they're kind of tuned. I think they're more tuned to the needs of the enterprise than they were before.
I think so, and I think the part of our evolution too is being a bit tighter around some of the sorts of categories that we're looking at, and within that, what's interesting and important. Maybe we'll get onto this, but I think the thing that we're constantly trying to get better at is being as efficient as we can with a startup founder's time. And so if we can tightly define the sorts of capabilities that we're looking for, the things that we think are a need to have rather than just kind of cool and interesting we want to play with, that helps us get to a quicker answer than something that's going to, everyone wants to be nice to the people that you interact with and be helpful. But ultimately, if there's not a real business case there, we kind of want to get to that answer pretty quickly. Because the worst thing we can do is kind of drag someone along with like a slow maybe, if ultimately we're not going to, invest in something.
I have so many questions I need to ask you. I'm still like, I want to ask you. So, but I'm going to definitely move into this about the themes and such. But I wanted to clarify something you just shared around kind of working with these companies and kind of the business case. Where does startup innovation live in the areas within Comcast? Is it considered R&D? Is it considered, is it considered, kind of, I don't know, the other categories, like kind of an immediate need when you are building your port codes for every cohort? Is it a spread? Like, hey, this company is, is less close to the business case, but maybe has some relevancy in 3 years from now? Or is it like, hey, we're looking for things that we can use kind of right now, next 18, 24 months. And that's, how is that, where is that sitting? And was it always sitting there? Has it changed?
We're kind of part of a broad continuum, I think, that goes from, teams like ours that are looking to, ultimately our objective is to build relationships with startups earlier than they might traditionally pop up on our radar. So if we can do the vetting and the investigation and get to meet them and work with them as they're growing, then that puts us in a good position to be able to help them and work with them moving forward. And so, broadly, we're at the earlier stage. We sit alongside groups like Comcast Ventures, that is making venture capital investments in companies that might be relevant to Comcast. We do have an R&D group, which is building their own technologies and working with other startups in ways that are more kind of future facing and kind of further out. We have groups that do acquisitions of companies that are just ready to kind of plug in and solve a particular need, or major partnerships with more advanced startups. So our team we sit within a group called strategic development. And the way that I think about strategic development is broadly, what's next for Comcast? What are the things that we should be looking at that are maybe not things that are just part of the day-to-day of the business, as the kind of the normal course of business. And so we often find companies that are ready to plug in and address a particular need. We find companies that are building things that are maybe on the roadmap in the next 3 to 5 years. So it's a bit of a mix, but broadly we're looking for what are the things that we should be learning about and doing next. One of our kind of our core goals is what we call innovation through insight. So we're looking to inform how we think about technology and products through the work that we do with these early stage founders, because those are the ones that are, they're several years ahead of us. They're at the coal face, really deep in a particular area. And so if we can build a relationship with them, help them, learn from them, become customers of theirs, maybe that's going to help add to the intelligence that exists in the business.
And so finally, we'll get to the theme question, because I think this speaks to actually how you're actually integrating with the cross Comcast to understand their needs and match that with the startups. You guys shifted to a theme-based approach. What was the impetus for that change? And I know there's a couple of different themes. I know the AI is only one of them. And so do you want to share a little bit about the other ones as well?
Yeah, it kind of comes back to what I was saying about us being a bit more defined in what we're looking for. So previously, when we were working with Techstars, we ran a program that was for pre-seed stage companies, so really early companies. The themes were broadly media, entertainment, and connectivity. So really anything that could be relevant to a business like ours. And as I said, it was a great successful experience, and lots of our teams got to work with incredible startups, and many of them have gone on to longer term business relationships with us. We felt that as we're kind of evolving our model, if we can be tighter on a particular theme, we can be much more efficient for the companies in the class. So we bring together a cohort of adjacent but not competitive companies, and so that we can really connect them with the right teams and be, as I say, respectful and efficient and targeted with their time. This year, coming into this year, we decided we were going to have this kind of more theme-based approach. And this year, the theme of AI has kind of imposed itself on us, as it has teams like ours across all corporations. And so it's been a really exciting year to, in the first cohort that we ran, we had lots of companies that were focused on generative AI, both on the entertainment and customer and enterprise side. This upcoming, we're kicking off a program in mid-October, which is more around enterprise AI, which are more of the kind of the infrastructure foundation type tools that we need in order to build these interesting experiences on top of them. And there's a big effort across the company, as there is in all businesses, to really learn more about this technology. We've been using AI and leaders in it for many years now, but the technology is evolving so quickly this year that being able to plug into some of these founders who are building companies, they come from building the underlying technology that a lot of these new experiences are built on. That for us is tremendously valuable as we think about where we should be focused, where we can build ourselves, where we need to bring in other people. And so I think that more focused approach around a particular theme has really helped us get more value and us drive more value for the founders that we work with.
And so the program is 6 weeks, which is very short.
Yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about kind of just like the brass tacks, like what does the program consist of? Why 6 weeks? What do they get? All that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, we decided that we were going to focus on what we felt that we could uniquely add and strip out a lot of the stuff that other organizations like Techstars are a better place to provide. And so the 6 weeks is really to help connect the founders with the right teams inside of Comcast to scope out proofs of concept and pilots that can help us evaluate the fit or mutually evaluate the fit, whether we're a fit for them and vice versa. And then begin the process of hopefully turning those initial engagements into longer term licenses and contracts with them. So the 6 weeks we tell founders really think about that as the kickoff, because our team exists to support those companies that we work with throughout the weeks and months and years that follow. And so we've built a portfolio now of companies that we're continuing to work with. 6 weeks is the blink of an eye for a corporation, and many of the things that you need to do in order to work with any vendor, but in particular a early stage startup company, take longer than that to get done. So the 6 weeks is really designed to immerse them in what we're looking for, how we can work together, help them build relationships. Ultimately, our goal is, keep us up to speed with how you're doing with Comcast. But if you've built such a strong relationship with the relevant business units in our company that you kind of take that and run with it, that's great, and we support along the way. But for those that are still looking for traction, or whether are new opportunities that come up, our job is, years post program, to help to be continuing to work with them, plug them in where we see opportunities to work with them. So the 6 weeks is pretty short and sharp. The feedback that we got from the first one is that it felt about right. It felt like we covered everything we needed to. We kind of were pretty efficient, and we're now off and working with all the companies that came through the first cohort.
How do you feel like the scouting activity, or, how much of the folks that you select are really from your team going out and like working through the ecosystem versus kind of the inbound, because there's just so many more founders than there were. What has that experience been like, and how are you kind of like, I guess, like kind of sharpening your perspective to be able to kind of cut through so much of the noise?
I think we're trying to shift to more of a recruitment model versus an application model. I think that we still get a lot of inbounds, and many of them are really interesting and great. But as we sharpen what we're looking for, and also build more relationships with investors or other partners that are also experts in those categories, it's easier for us to go and find the companies that we think would be a good fit. So we spend a lot of time building those relationships and having those partners know about the sorts of things that we're interested in. I was in Toronto last week, hosting a dinner for investors there, to help them understand what we're looking for, what the opportunities are. My colleague Laura was in San Diego, doing the same thing. So we're through that network of partners, I think we're getting more efficient at recruiting the companies that we think we can be helpful to.
And that makes a lot of sense. I think that's one of the biggest, one of the things that I get asked a lot from, and people who actually watch Accelerator Insider, are a lot of them are venture capitalists and investors who are just looking to understand the MD, so they can understand kind of how they think and how they're supporting companies, and it helps them build kind of confidence in the cohort itself. And because there's so much going on, but it's really hard to identify where's a really strong support for business building versus some more of the educational programming versus some of the founder pitch stuff. And there's all these different components, right? As well. So
and one of the things that our program it's called the Lift Labs Accelerator, but it's very, very different than a traditional accelerator in all the ways that we've talked about. For example, we don't invest up front in the companies. We invest potentially in some of them after the program, but that's not a prerequisite. And so there might be founders that are a little bit further along. Maybe they've already raised a Series A or a Series B, and they think, well, I don't need an accelerator. That was me, 5 years ago. But the goal of our program is not necessarily to accelerate you building a business. It's to accelerate your relationship with us. And so sometimes we have to have those direct conversations with founders to help them understand that actually it can be a fit for them, even if they're at a later stage, and we're not going to waste their time with stuff that really they're beyond, or they don't need at the stage that they're at.
Yeah, I think this is actually a huge conversation. I always say it's like a double-edged sword. Like the more you democratize something, there's kind of like this challenge sometime, because you end up with a lot more programming, a lot more kind of resources, but a lot more programming. So you increase, you increase the opportunity, but there's all these application layers and all these other ways in which that can be challenging as well. But fundamentally, what we're seeing is like, hey, folks are opening their doors and they're trying to find ways to make it make sense for the enterprise to open their doors, right? And be more accessible and democratic about access. And so, to your point, it's like, it's not an accelerator, but it's kind of the necessary way in which you can engage with the company in a thoughtful manner that's going to yield success.
Yeah, I mean, back to the earlier point we were talking about, where people are kind of busy and they have lots of things on their plate. I think one of the ways that the Accelerator can be helpful is it's a known entity inside of Comcast. Like, people, it has a brand, they know what it is, and so kind of putting yourself in that vehicle and trusting that we're going to get you to the right place is an efficient way to get inside the business, to meet the right people, as opposed to just trying to do it off on your own and trying to figure out who you should be connecting with. So it becomes that kind of Trojan horse, if you like, to get you into the business and get you to the right people.
So you've had a lot of success in this. So since, I think I said 2018, over 80% of your portfolio companies have landed a proof of concept, pilot, or commercial deal with Comcast, NBC Universal. And I remember seeing the article, like, I think last year, being like, when the first time it happened, like all the companies got like some kind of benefit. So the first thing is like, what do you attribute that to? And the second thing is like, you've been with them for a little while. Was that like also your brainchild a little bit, was like to kind of get to that goal, or was that just happenstance that occurred?
I think it happened as we were, I think there's lots of different factors. I think us being a bit more targeted in what we're looking for helps. I think companies being a little bit further along helps with that. I think our team just getting better at picking companies and plugging them in. I mean, it's 80% overall, but for the last couple of cohorts, it's been 100%. Now our job is to take those initial successes and turn them into long-term licenses and commercial agreements and all the rest of it. And that's what we spend a lot of time doing, working with our portfolio on. But I think that, it's for me, that kind of metric is a step along the way. It's the end goal is not that we do something with you and then it's like, oh great, we succeeded. The success is can we get you fully integrated? Can you deliver on the promise that you've made, or your technology holds for our business, and can we learn from you along the way? And that number will necessarily be less than 100%, because you kind of find things out along the way. But I think it's a combination of all those different factors.
All right, so as we close out here, I have kind of maybe two questions for you. The first one, what words of advice do you have for startup founders wanting to work with large enterprises like Comcast?
I think I'll actually steal one of my friends is a MD for Techstars, and he talks a lot about this concept of happy ears, that you can often hear what you want to hear in a conversation with an investor or with a business unit. And I think that what we see at Comcast, as I talked a lot about, like the teams want to be helpful. They love working with founders. They think they get excited by what they're doing in this emerging technology. And a startup can go into a meeting and think, great, like I've got a customer here. This is amazing. And then we'll kind of back channel with them and they'll be like, wow, I really like the founder. She was amazing and like great background, and we'll play around with it, but like I'm not sure there's much there for us long term. And so being able to distinguish between a team that just wants to be helpful and kind of be there along on the journey versus, is there a real business case? Are you solving something that this team really cares about? That is going to save you a lot of time in the long run. And finding teams like ours inside the corporation that can be that translator to be able to kind of really go back to the teams internally and be like, is there, what do you need here? Is there something there, so that we don't waste anybody's time and kind of get their hopes up if actually there's not really much potential there.
I mean, I think you're spot on. So, I mean, in 2013, I was in a Techstars company in New York, and I was doing lean startup methodology. So I was a curriculum writer doing and training people in New York and all over the world in lean startup methodology. This is back when like Startup Weekend was still a thing and lean startup machine was a thing. And,
Yeah.
you know, and it's been fascinating to me because I still teach it now all across in all different sectors. And the story has been it's a pre-seed conversation. Validate your talk to your customers, validate the business model. But what you really find out is that until you really are at maybe even Series A, and basically every new customer that you want to engage, you really have to pressure test the problem solution. Like you have to really validate the problem and the solution, and then also validate the design, then also validate, right? And that ability to signal versus noise ratio, like that ability to check your biases and understand your assumptions and really understand yeah, you might really have a great conversation with somebody, but it doesn't convert to a sale necessarily.
Yeah.
Like that ability to hone that skill is probably one of the most important skills a founder, I think, can have from a efficiency perspective, right? Saving money, time, and energy, just not building the wrong thing because you really want it to be the thing you want it to be versus what someone wants from you instead.
Yeah. I think one of the best examples of that I've seen, we had a company that we worked with earlier this year, and they built technology that helps big enterprises manage conversational interactions with customers across chat or call centers or websites or all the rest of it. And it's just a really easy way to do it all in one place. And so they came into us with a very sophisticated solution. They're working with other businesses on it. And so they told us a little bit about it, but they kind of turned the conversation back on our teams and said, like, this is easy for us. Like, we've already done it. You can kind of plug it in. Here it is. Tell us what your big problems are. Like, if we could solve one thing for you, what would that be? And how can we go and do that together? And so it kind of became this really interesting collaboration where our teams were really interested in what this startup had built. But they said, but if you could go a step further and do this, then the startup was able to think, okay, well, we'll go and talk to other companies and see, is that a broad enough need for us to invest in? And that's where I think like, if you have these opportunities through programs like ours to get connected to the decision makers in these big organizations, don't sell yourself short. Like, don't just look for a quick win to get a pilot or something. Really think about, can this be a much longer term relationship, a much longer term strategic relationship? Because it's quite hard to get those people in a room. And if you're there and you've got teams like ours helping you build connections and relationships with these people, really think like as big as you can about we've got what we can do today, but what can we do together that doesn't exist at the moment.
Yeah, I think when you step outside of what I call startup swirl, startup land, kind of the fever of it, you get to really kind of practical business building. And you see that in founders that really understand, like, I'm trying to build something for a lifetime here. I'm trying to really understand and make sure we're grounded in how we think about growth, right? And that's a huge part. And so, okay, so kind of last question here. So you've been in this space for at least with Comcast for 5 or 6 years and probably a bit longer. Are you still like bullish on like the innovation sector as like the thing? Is it growing? Is it shrinking? Are we in a marathon? Are we in a sprint? How are you feeling about the innovation ecosystem currently?
It's a tough one. I don't feel remotely qualified to give an opinion. I struggle with the idea of kind of an innovation sector and innovation ecosystem. I think one of the things that I've seen just working at Comcast is every team in every different function is broadly looking to do things quicker, more efficiently, to create new experiences for consumers or employees. And so the thing that our team gets really excited about is we get to both meet some of the most inspiring, interesting entrepreneurs around the world that are kind of like dedicating their lives to doing a particular thing. And then we get to kind of see just the massive scale of a business like ours. And I think the really interesting bit is where the ingenuity and the urgency of the founders kind of collides with just the infinite scale that these big businesses have. And that, I think, is where the interesting stuff is, and that, that continues to happen all the time. That's the thing that remains so exciting about the work that myself and our team and many counterparts at other corporations get to do.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Luke, for your time today. I really, really appreciate it. And everyone is watching, thank you for watching another episode of Accelerator Insider.
Thank you.
Bye.